Understudy was an episode that I feel like I do kind of pass up a lot. Watching again, though, it's a pretty good finale. Well, season finale for season 6. For most seasons, I feel we've had some pretty good finales. Season 1 was just a 5-episode season, so there wasn't actually, end to the story, basically. Season 2, of course, it was the deal, because at the time, they know if the show's going to get picked up further or not. So they had the deal episode, which was basically teasing that Jerry and Elaine end up getting back together. But then, of course, when the show continues, that all gets dropped. Season 3 was the keys, when Kramer runs off to California to become an actor, after getting into a fight with Jerry about him barging into his apartment a lot with his spare keys. Season 4 was the pilot episode for the Jerry Show. Last season it was the opposite. That did set the stage for what's to come next. Season 6 was also a good one too. I mean, really, the only person that set up a future for, though, was Elaine. Everybody else didn't really have a future, because season 7 has a little bit of like an arc that happens starting in the first episode. That happens throughout. That was the theme of season 7. Season 6 kind of had an off and on theme. It was basically like the beginning. Well, season 6 it is. It started a new era for George, and Jerry and Kramer kind of remained in the same boat. And Elaine, of course, had a new job, but of course she suffers another setback 2 episodes ago in the Diplomats Club. I thought first for some reason, because I forgot about the storyline with Elaine in this episode. But I thought for some reason, this is the episode where Elaine got fired. But it was actually back in the Diplomats Club episode where that one happened. But the Understudy. The idea from the Understudy came because, Jerry, had played a lot of these, celebrity softball games in Central Park. There'd be the improv, who'd be, just a bunch of random people. And then, of course, the comic strip, which Jerry would be on that team. And of course, they thought, this idea of there could be some big name there, Al Pacino. And, well, what happens if somebody accidentally hurts a big name like Al Pacino or something like that? Of course, they didn't do Al Pacino, but in this episode, they got Bette Midler. So, what's the reason why, what will be, the big deal about Bette Midler getting injured in the game inadvertently from one of our main characters? Well, then they go with this idea. Jerry is dating this horrible actress named Janice, whatever her name is. I can never pronounce it. Who's super overdramatic, super sensitive. Everything in this episode made her cry, from the movie Beaches to the bad publicity she got for Bette Midler getting hurt, which will explain why in a second, to when she messed up at the end of the show, when she was, here's the reason why, she was significant, is because she was Bette Midler's understudy for her Broadway musical, Rochelle. She broke down, she messed up there, but the only thing, and she also cried when she accidentally dropped her hot dog in Central Park. The only thing, though, that did not make her cry was when she was told her grandmother died. And she did not cry from that. Anyways, though. So, everyone was basically involved in the Bette Midler storyline, except for Elaine. Jerry and George were getting ready to play in a celebrity softball game at Central Park. They were improv. They were going to be playing against the cast of Rochelle. Which, of course, Jerry would be playing against his girlfriend, again, who is Bette Midler's understudy. And of course, Kramer wanted to go because Kramer, who's a big fan of a bunch of random things we didn't think of, is actually a big fan of Bette Midler's. So he goes to watch the game. He meets Bette Midler, offers to buy her a snow cone. She wants pineapple, but every concession stand he goes to in New York, he cannot find pineapple until he gets one and heads back. Well, meanwhile, during the game, Jerry was pitching. George was the catcher. Jerry, George does a mound visit and jokingly says something about, what if he gave her some, chin music or whatnot, which, Jerry's like, no, I'm not doing that. The whole idea of, they mentioned how, understudy, and of course, Kramer is too, understudies, they could be very slick because they're after your part. they're jagging, like, what if, they accidentally, something happened to Bette Midler that, oh no, she's hurt, my girlfriend now gets to do the part. Well, towards the end of the game, I think the bases, they were down a couple runs, I think it was. George comes up and hits an inside the park home run. However, though, when he gets to home plate, he just bulldozes into Bette Midler, who is the catcher, and launches Bette Midler, and she, goes into the fence. And she gets injured. And in the midst of all of this, first off, Kramer is running back as he found the pineapple and gives it to Bette. Everybody else, though, notices that, it's Jerry's friend, and they all know that Jerry is dating Janice, whatever her name is. I can never remember how to pronounce it. So they think they did on purpose. So they chase them across Central Park, and they run back and hide in Jerry's apartment. And of course, Jerry's girlfriend joins them too, and it's like, Husband says thank you, basically. But she's crying about that, of course, too. But of course, top story is, of course, that Bette Midler is injured and not able to be in Rochelle. Of course, Kramer, who was a big Bette Midler fan, confronts them and basically tries to play Bette Midler's bodyguard for the rest of the episode, where he would be like taking care of her. He made her a macaroni Midler, basically, doing like a callback to the Fusilli Jerry, which that's one of two Fusilli Jerry references in this episode. And then, of course, when Kramer stops them from coming in to apologize to Bette Midler, Jerry, George, and Jerry's girlfriend get kicked out of a taxi because they were recognized as the person who put Bette Midler out of Rochelle. Like, they got so much hate from it. And then, of course, Kramer, I think after a while, didn't think that Bette was in good hands, so he took her, and at the end of the episode, when Jerry's had gone to his apartment after going to Rochelle to see his girlfriend, who just flubbed the part, Kramer hears him and Jerry hears him and Bette singing in Kramer's apartment, Rochelle, but then, of course, Jerry doesn't believe that Bette is actually in there, pretty much. So that was that was like the main story of that episode. I kind of just like flew through it. But Elaine's story, because Elaine kind of like is the one character kind of like, she like, planted the seeds for her future at the end of this episode. So Elaine was going to a nail salon, a Korean nail salon. But what she was suspicious of, she thought that all the women there were talking to each other in Korean, saying mean things about Elaine. So then Elaine tries to wonder, who's someone we know that speaks Korean? To where she finds out from Jerry that Frank Costanza spoke Korean. He once spoke Korean to Sung Young Moon. Apparently, he learned how to speak fluent Korean, and he sold religious statues. And of course, Elaine meets up with Frank Costanza, but he starts telling her much more than she wants to hear about his history with him in Korea. He also says he had an affair with a Korean woman. Unfortunately, though, it ended because the father did not approve of Frank when he came home, and he wouldn't take his shoes off. And he basically says in Korean that this guy isn't my kind of guy, which I mention a little fun fact about that at the end of this review. So he agrees to go with Elaine to the Korean, to the nail salon, and to basically see what they're saying about her. Which in the end, he catches them because they were basically making fun of Elaine. And then once Frank, busts them, they kick Elaine out. And then Frank Costanza was still, barking at them. But this woman in the back hears Frank, and she's like, that voice, it sounds familiar. And she's just talking about how she had this affair in Korea, and then put it together, that's Kim, the woman who Frank Costanza had the love affair with in Korea. So she comes out, and they reunite. And this is going back in the Fusilli Jerry, where I thought at first, that was the end of, Frank and Estelle's separation, but apparently not yet, because Frank and Kim try to, start over again. They're in the car driving, talking, they're about to, start over again, until they hit a pothole, and then Frank Costanza, the second reference to the Fusilli Jerry, stops short with Kim, who was like, that's an insult, we don't do that in our country. He goes, I want to go home, I never want to see you again. So just like that, that's it for that. So Elaine, meanwhile, was walking through the rain, crying, and she was very upset until she bumps into some guy who, was like trying to console her. Are you crying? And then he goes, oh, it doesn't matter why. He goes, it's a really nice jacket. And he starts rattling off these things, these features about the jacket. And Elaine's like, how do you know this? And the guy goes, that's my coat. And Elaine's like, you mean? And he goes, yes, I'm J. Peterman. It is the introduction of J. Peterman, Elaine's boss, for the remainder of the series. And quite a unique character too. Him and Elaine, they go out to eat, and I like this. I do like this scene where they were sitting in the restaurant and talking, because I like how the cinematic, like dark tone, like not dark tone, like dark, visual was, because John O'Hurley, is not so much of like a comedy actor. He's more known as being like a soap opera type actor. And I feel like, it was kind of like him fitting into his comfort zone a little bit in some way. Being introduced or whatnot. Kind of help people make the reference, of course, But of course, he basically offers Elaine a job, and Elaine accepts. But of course, she sees Jerry later and tell him about it, and she starts she basically starts explaining something about this clothing, like how Peterman would, with his rambles and whatnot, his funny rambles that he would just go on and on and on about. Now, I forgot to mention this in the doodle. Well, I didn't want to give it away, of course, but when Kramer was sitting at was having lunch with Elaine, whenever he was worried that he lost his sense of taste because of him being in Jerry's poisoned apartment and eating that peach, he starts going on about something, but the way he was talking made me think of how Peterman talks. Which, of course, the idea of this was just, that, I guess, Larry David said that the J. Peterman catalog always came along with, came to the office, and then they were always, just, read it, and, they thought, they basically thought that the real John Peterman was some type of, a nut job, so they're this would be a pretty funny character for Elaine to, to work with and whatnot. And, of course, henceforth, bring in John O'Hurley, and, again, yeah, it was definitely a character they got a lot of mileage out of for the rest of the series that I thought was very, very well done. So, again, Elaine kind of, sets herself up for the future. Jerry and George, unfortunately, didn't end on the bright note. And then with Kramer, though, you got to spend some time with Bette Midler and sing Rochelle, Rochelle. That's the review of the actual episode. There's a lot of trivia, actually, for this. Of course, the story with Elaine and the bringing a spy with her to a nail salon was actually based off a real-life experience from Carol Leifer, who had kind of a similar experience. This is also one of the only episodes in season 6 to not feature any stand-up routines. As there was some originally, but it got cut because the show was running 10 minutes too long. Let me see here. What else we got here? There's also a line when both Frank and Elaine were at the nail salon, where one of the lines that the women said that was in Korea was the fact that I think I saw a moth fly out of the pocket, which is making a reference to the moth cabana wear that George had given to whatever the name of that co-place was. Of course, this is John O'Hurley's first appearance as J. Peterman. Let me see here. Okay, so the line of "this guy, this is not my kind of guy" is a quote that was taken from some band leader, Buddy Rich, chewing out his band, which Jerry apparently was a huge fan of, like his bootleg tapes. He was known, again, I kind of talk about a little bit back in the opposite. He was known this guy who was just has these great lines of like pure rage and such. Again, the three that were used in the series, we've only seen two of them so far. Well, one we haven't seen yet is in the opener for season 9, where Kenny Bania is trying to latch on to Jerry and try to become a better comedian. But basically, Jerry says some line, we'll see how he does up there without the assistance, basically. Back in the opposite, when George was yelling at those guys in the theater who were kicking the seats and saying, if I gotta tell you, I'm gonna take you outside, I'm gonna show you what it's like. And of course, the one with Frank Costanza saying, "This guy is not my kind of guy," was all taken from Buddy Rich. Of course, the actual J. Peterman catalog, though, is based in Lexington. And of course, the show itself actually gave a lot of great publicity, though, to the J. Peterman catalog. Other celebrities besides Bette Midler were Julie Andrews, Cher, Mary Tyler Moore, and Carol Burnett were also considered to be the celebrity that gets hurt. Let me see here. Of course, back in season 4, in the episode The Movie, Rochelle was being shown in the theaters. This episode originally was going to be titled The Injury. Kramer moving Bette's hospital bed to keep her safe is a reference also to The Godfather. What else we got here? Of course, though, I gotta say this too. The episode where George runs into Bette Midler, technically, I thought that Bette had caught the ball, and George, who was not forced, did get tagged. But of course, him running into Bette, caused the ball to drop. If that was done today, George would have been out because of unnecessary roughness or whatnot on the catcher. Because back in 2011, I think it was, they created the Buster Posey rule when Buster Posey got injured after Scott Cousins rammed into him and broke his ankle. If it happened back then, he could have called it the Bette Midler rule for all we know. But the inside look also ended with give the cast getting a few people like Jerry, Carol Burnett, Peter Millman. I think Larry David also gave their thoughts on writer Marjorie Gross, who I think this episode took place in 1995. She died in June of 96 from ovarian cancer. And she was only 40 years old too. So they kind of ended into with a little bit of a small little tribute, brief little thoughts. I think she did write one more episode in the series, The Showerhead, but I'm not sure why they put it in season 6's finale of The Inside Look, but who knows. But that's the Understudy. A good way to end season 6. We got through season 6 fairly quickly. So we got through pretty quickly, so hopefully we can keep rolling here pretty good. So guys, that's it for season 6. Season 7, we got a storyline arc again. Jerry and George have a pact. What's that pact? We'll talk about it next. And of course, also, it's the beginning of Elaine's journey working for J. Peterman as well. And the moments he will have as well. So guys, what are your thoughts on the Understudy episode? What are your thoughts on season 6 of Seinfeld? Make sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. And follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAir93. I'll see you guys in my season 7 reviews of Seinfeld. We have 3 seasons left. We're getting to the home stretch here, guys. Till then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night, and peace out, everybody.